not a bad crowd. Hello, everyone. How y'all doing? About to get started. I'm Anjuan Simmons, and I work for GitHub. Very happy to have everyone here. I know people are still coming in, which is fine. Has this not been a great first day of the conference portion of this conference? We had Scott Hanselman, who kicked us off. Great sessions. I'm partial to the Hubbers who've been presenting. I think they've done an amazing job. The food was amazing during lunch. I've gone to a lot of conferences, and NDC consistently has better food. I always tell people, if this is your first tech conference, it's all downhill from here because you're going to be probably disappointed unless your next conference is an NDC conference. And there are plenty. They have locations in Oslo and Porto and all around. So I want to thank everyone for coming to my talk. I do want to get to know the audience just a little bit. I like to know my people. So how many of you are still looking for that first job as a software developer? Raise your hand. Okay, we're all gainfully employed. Okay, all right. How many of you are in your first year as a developer? All right, a couple. All right, toward the back. It's okay. You can sit closer. It's okay. All right, how many of you are in your first, let's say, 2 to 3 years? All right, we got a few. How many of you are managers? All right, cool, hands down. How many of you try management, but you're like, I'm not doing this anymore? Yeah, I've been a manager for a long time, and I've almost been with you. I actually think that it's healthy to let engineers try on the manager role. Charity Majors has done a lot of writing about this, and I've actually helped I've helped engineers, typically senior engineers, do that, where they try being an engineering manager for a period of time, and I've had a 100% conversion rate so far, where they all decided, given that they had this trial period, and it is a no-fault, totally easy commitment where you will not be judged whether you decide to become a manager or go back to being an IC. And it's been amazing. So I do recommend, if you can pull that off, that you do. So this talk is called Backwards Compatible because I've been in the software industry for a very long time, over a quarter century. I started in 1997. It's now 2023, so that's 26, 27 years. And over that time period, I've often wondered, what would I tell myself? What would I tell past versions of Anjuan Simmons at that first year mark, at that first 3 years mark, at that first manager role? And this talk is designed to give you all that advice because a lot of the lessons that I learned over this quarter century have been learned the hard way. And so I'm hoping that you can vicariously learn through me and hopefully avoid a lot of the mistakes that I made. But I'm also trying to say the things that often aren't said out loud. Being a manager for as long as I've been, there are a lot of things that we don't really say out loud, but everyone kind of understands. And so I'm going to go through those things. So let me just kind of give you, again, a summary of my career. So you see Accenture in 1997. I was at Deloitte for a little bit, and I'm now at GitHub. Now, there are a few companies that are also between those marks on the timeline, and I did not plan my career this way. One of the things that I wanted to accomplish through this talk is helping you understand that your career is not something that just happens to you. You have agency over your career, and you can do the work to align your career with your goals. But there are some notes that I think happen in my career, right? So we have this Accenture and Deloitte and Infosys stage. That's kind of big consulting. I learned Oracle and SAP projects. Then OnCenter, Assemble, Questback, Slalom, and Help Scout. Those were my kind of startup years. That's when I was learning, okay, at Accenture, massive resources, everything at my disposal. At these smaller companies, it was everyone wears multiple hats. You have to be scrappy. And I think that now that I've landed here at GitHub, that I have the best of both worlds. My management style combines both having access to the resources that a long-lived company like GitHub has, but I'm also very hands-on. And I think that that really informs my management style. And I know that some of you may be asking, okay, this is a cool timeline. Is this the scale? No, it's not. Not the scale. I've spent hours moving around the bubbles. It's an approximation for how long I've been at each company. But this is the timeline of my career. And I really want to make sure that everyone who hears this talk, again, knows that you have agency over your career. So I'm going to start at the beginning. In fact, I'm going to start before the beginning and go to going through getting hired. And so I think everyone in this room said that you've already gotten a job in the developer sector of the economy, that you write code for a living. And when I was first getting my first job back in 1997, I did a lot of preparation. I did mock interviews at the Career Center. I did what was leak code back then, which was reading a lot of books on like Objective-C and all that stuff. And I went through lots of notes on the companies, because we didn't have the websites you have now that tell you a lot about how companies hire. So it was all going through like notebooks and joining clubs and understanding what people knew. And I learned a lot about that first hiring experience. But one of the things that I think people don't really understand about getting hired, and again, I've interviewed a lot of engineers. I've hired people at GitHub. I've hired people at most of the companies that were on that timeline. But one thing that's not well understood is that you have about 5 minutes to convince the hiring manager or the person who is interviewing you that you're a fit for the candidate. Just 5 minutes. People say that your resume, you got 2 minutes. You got a little bit more time. But generally, as a hiring manager, someone who has interviewed a lot of people, usually I know within the first 5 minutes if this candidate is a fit or not. I've actually heard other hiring managers say that if an interview is scheduled for 45 minutes and it's not going the way that you think, to cut the interview short. Now, I don't do that because, one, I've already scheduled time to do the interview. Two, I think it's more human and fair to just give the person the time that we've set aside to let them give a pitch for working at the company. But I often do know very early that this person is either going to be a fit for my team or not. And there are a couple reasons for this. One, unless you're the very first person after the job rec was open to interview, the interviewers probably talked to a lot of people before you. And so they have people who were great, they've heard people who are not so great, and really you're trying to interview to be like the last best person who came through the queue. So that's the reality of that. Two, there are a lot of things that people do that really self-select themselves out. And I want to give you a few strategies for really beating this clock, right? Getting past that 5-minute mark. One is, it's the obvious stuff, right? It's the stuff that maybe your mother or your father or someone who cares about you said, and that's be on time. Be on time. Even for a Zoom interview, you should be on time, especially for an interview that's virtual, because you just got to wake up and log on, put on a shirt. I've had people who I'm interviewing for like a senior engineer role at big companies, and it's virtual, and they're late. And again, that doesn't mean that they're totally not going to pass or get fits the requirements from me, but it doesn't help. So simple things like be on time. Also, one other thing that I can tell you is be concise. I have asked a person, right, interview started, and I asked a question that I'm sure all of you have heard. Tell me a little bit about yourself, right? I asked that. That's usually the first question. Tell me a little bit about yourself. 15 minutes later, they're still going on about what they did in kindergarten and how they learned to write code, writing on notebook paper. Be concise. And so one thing I always tell people when I'm coaching them on how to interview is you can always give a summary and then say, oh, I can add more information if you would like. That's just gold. As a hiring manager, that's great because I didn't have agency to say, oh, no, I think I'm good. Or I can say, oh, you know what? I really like what you were saying. Please go on. So that's one thing. Also, I've pushed at, and I failed a couple of times, but I've been able to successfully convince the engineering org to publish the interview questions online. Because one of the things that I found over a lot of time hiring people at various companies, people from different backgrounds, is that a lot of the people who come to the interview don't speak English as their native language. And so when you ask them a question, they are hearing the question in English, they are translating it to their native language, they are getting an answer together, and then they are translating it back into English in order to convey it to you. And I think that that often puts non-native speakers of English at an unfair disadvantage. So by putting the questions online, then you're able to remove that unfair disadvantage. You're leveling the playing field. And I think this is an act of inclusion. This is an act of kindness. And I've gotten really good feedback from doing this. And so at Help Scout, the company I was at before GitHub, we have the technical screen questions on a public repo. We have the initial screen questions where they're all there. Now, there are a few things that we do because we want to be careful with this. We post the whole interview bank. So we don't just put 2. We put the 20 or 30 questions that the interviewer could pull from, but they're all there. 2, we also ask questions where it's not easy to memorize and answer. It's very much a behavior type of interviews, like tell me about a time where you were behind on something at work and you had to recover because you had a tight deadline, right? You really can't memorize an answer to that. And so we did this because we wanted, again, to level the playing field. One other benefit of this process, of this policy of making the interview questions public is some people need think time. Right? There are people who are like off the cuff and you can ask them a question and then they have a crisp answer. They just knock it out of the park really easy and you're impressed. But there are people who are equally capable who need processing time. They need think time. And often these 2 candidates can come through the interview queue and one is really crisp and they're fast and it's a great answer. And then another person is just taking their time and they're maybe saying something, they're like, oh, wait, I said that wrong, maybe let me say that again. And really, they're equally capable, but you would not know that because one just simply needs more processing time. I'm a processor. I am not great off the cuff. Now, if I rehearse, I'm great. If I'm at an interview and I can get the questions in advance, I'm going to wow whoever is, if I'm qualified for the role. I can do that. But if I go in cold and they ask me a question, even one that I probably know the answer to, I'm just not great at those off-the-cuff responses. So making the interview questions public was also a way to be kind, to be more inclusive. And there is something that comes along with that, right? Because if the organization makes these questions public, and what we do is that when you get the email, when we schedule your time to be questioned by the hiring manager, we put a link to the GitHub repo and say all the questions that can be asked are here. And if you come to the interview and you obviously have not done that, that's not a good look. So if a company is taking the time to be inclusive, to make these questions public, it's really to your benefit to read through the questions, think through them, have thoughtful answers, because I've been at the companies where I've made this public and I asked that question from the question bank and the person says, that's a really good question. I'm like, I know, right? I wrote the question, it's online. And then they come up with like not a great answer. So if you're interviewing at a company that does that, it is to your benefit to take some time to go through that. Also, one thing that helps you to really, this is typically past the 5-minute mark. If you do the things that I just described, you'll make it past the 5-minute mark. If the interviewer asks you, do you have any questions for me? Please have questions. This is an easy thing to do. I've had multiple candidates, it's not the majority, when I ask, hey, all right, I've enjoyed talking with you. Think I understand what I needed to understand from this time. Do you have any questions for me? And they say, no, I don't have any questions. That's just a self-inflicted error that you can easily avoid. And you can ask questions that actually can help you better understand the role. You can ask, is this position that I'm interviewing for, is it a backfill, meaning that you're trying to replace someone who's left, or is it a totally new role? that tells the interviewer that you're thinking about working at that company. Because if it's a backfill, then that means that you're probably going to have to come in and start immediately showing what you can do. But if it's a new team, then that means that the company is growing. And so you can take time to also be part of that growth, right? That's just a very thoughtful question to ask. So having questions that are available is essential and can help you get moved on to the next level. The other thing that I would say, part of the hiring process, one thing that I wish I knew when I started hiring, when I started going through the process of trying to find a job, is the first offer is usually not the best offer. And I think that a lot of people don't understand this. A company has a certain budget range in mind for every role. Now, the good news is that due to laws in various countries and even in the US, they're starting to put the salary range in the job description. So they say this role in this location, the salary range is between this and this. So that's great information to have. If you have that information, that's gold that you should really use. But what we're trying to do when we're trying to hire you is that we're trying to calibrate where you are on that range. Now, a lot of companies, we don't do this explicitly, but we have a limited budget for the people that we're trying to hire. So we want to offer you an offer that is within what we think you'll take, but it's probably not going to be the higher offer, because if you take the lower offer, well then, that's great, right? We get the same person doing the role for less money, and that's just something we don't say out loud. But what you can do is that you can always negotiate. You can always negotiate. Now, when I say negotiate, I'm talking about total compensation. Does anyone know what total compensation is? Right? Because a lot of people think about compensation as salary. But the money you make from a company is way more than salary. There are any stock that you get. There might be a signing bonus. You may be able to negotiate working from home. You may be able to get a home office stipend because you may need to, hey, I'm working remotely, I need to buy a new monitor for my home office. These are all things that should be described in that offer. So when you get that offer, what you can do is, if the salary isn't what you're looking for, you can negotiate the other aspects of your total comp. So you can, and I typically do this in email, I say, okay, well, the salary that you offered is a little bit less than what I was expecting. It's not in line with what I think I can offer. But if the signing bonus is changed from $20,000 to $30,000, I think that I can work with that. Or if a company says you can work from home on Fridays, you can say, well, the salary is not really what I'm looking for. If I can work from home on Mondays and Fridays, then I think that that's a fair exchange. And so by giving them options, then you can see what they respond to. And often that will tell you where there's wiggle room. Because often if they can't budge on the salary number, they can often budge on things like the signing bonus. You can negotiate more stock. You can do all these things to get a total compensation package that works for you. Now, again, you've all worked at companies, so I think you've all been through this. But I always try to remind people that everything is negotiable. Everything is negotiable. You just have to take the time to negotiate. I've developed way better offers over my career by negotiating the components of my total compensation in the offer. All right, so you gotten hired. You're happy, you're in your first year of your career. You're probably learning a lot, because when you start at a new company, there's a lot to learn. And I do want to say that even if you are not a new person to the industry, having your first job, writing code for a living, starting at a new company is hard, because we usually work in very complex environments. Writing code is often like making magic, right? You're trying to cast these spells to make the impossible happen. So it's just very understandable that anyone who joins is going to struggle a little bit when they join. So a lot of companies do things like they have really healthy onboarding. And I often say that onboarding and retention are two sides of the same coin. The better you onboard someone, the higher the chance that they will stay at your company and be successful. So again, at GitHub, we do this. At a lot of the companies that I work for, we put a lot of effort into onboarding. In fact, one of the things that I push for at a company is that when a new engineer joins the company, we have them receive a series of letters called Dear New Engineer at our company, and they get it weekly over Slack. And so all of the engineering managers wrote a letter that we have in a repo that's automatically pulled, and then you get it your first day, then a week later, then a week after that. So this Dear New Engineer letter is a series of just advice from the engineering managers to this new hire. And it's things like, again, we work in complicated areas. We're writing code for a living. We know that mistakes happen. Don't worry about it. We expect you to make mistakes. The key thing is that you learn from it. We also talk about how we have an async culture, and it's really important to work in public. And by asking questions in public, then you're probably asking something that someone else is also wondering, but they did not want to ask. So these Dear New letters are meant to help you onboard. And so that's a practice that I really have found a lot of success with. And so I think if you try your organization, I hope that you also find success doing that. But again, back to a developer starting their first year. The thing I wish that I knew when I started my career, again, 26 years ago, is that you have to brag about your work. I used to think that, well, my work speaks for itself. If I just write the code and the test pass and I meet the spec, then it's obvious that I'm doing a good job. That is not true. Work has no mouth. It can't speak. You have to speak for your work. Movie theaters do this all the time, right? Even though we have multiple ways of understanding how what movies are out, we have Twitter, we have the Fandango app, we have all these apps that let people know, hey, these movies are out. When you drive by a cinema or you drive by a movie theater, what do you see? You see the movies. And you'll be like, oh, there's a new Mission Impossible movie coming out. I had no idea. Oh, it's a part 1, right? Maybe I should go see that. You have to do the same thing. You have to have a marquee around your career to make sure that everyone, especially your manager, knows what you're playing, that they know what you bring to the table. And there are a couple of things that I recommend people do. One is keep what I call a brag doc. Has anyone heard of a brag doc? Right? It's been really a popular thing. All a brag document is a document that you use to write down what you've accomplished. But one of the things that I really want to let people know is activity and impact are not the same. Again, this is something I wish I knew year 3 or 4 of my career, because it's really easy to just put activity. If you use GitHub, it's really easy to list your activity, right? Like, Git remembers, right? We talk about how the North remembers. No, Git remembers. Everything that you do on GitHub, because we use Git, is all very carefully recorded and stored. So you can list all of your pull requests, all of your comments on discussions, all the issues that you authored. All that can be discovered just by writing the right query. But as a manager, I know that I'm not looking for activity. I'm looking for impact. What business value did you deliver to the team, to GitHub, to our customers? That's what I want to know. Activity is really meaningless. Impact is everything. So when you're working on your brag doc, it's really important to list the things that had impact on, again, the team, the company, the customers. And by keeping that document going, what you're doing is that you're creating an in real-time, contemporaneous log of what you've done for the company. And that's things like, hey, I noticed that our PR process was weak. And so I worked with the team to come up with an issue describing how we can do PR, how we can make these reviews faster and more effective. And so I reduced the average PR time from X to Y, right? That's impact. And so by keeping that brag doc, you're making it really easy when it comes time to do the end-of-the-year review, right? And most companies have maybe a mid-year review or an end-of-the-year period where you're going over what you've accomplished. You've all been through that. And so what do we typically do? We're going through Slack. We're going on GitHub or wherever your source control is. We're probably going through emails. You're trying to remember what we did. But if you have a brag doc that you've kept up to date, then you simply pull up that document. And you may have like a delta of maybe a few weeks, but you have that journal of your impact. And by doing that, when it's time to go over what you've done with your manager, it's easy. It's almost already documented. So that's one thing that I tell people. If you're in that first 3 or 4 years of your career, I would highly recommend that you go with the brag doc. Brag documents aren't just great for those reviews. And again, those reviews are important, right? That's typically where, as a manager, I'm looking at the impact, right? What is the impact of all the engineers on my team? Because that is what we use to determine rewards. That determines salary increases. That goes into the bonus. That goes into how much stock people get, right? So it's really, really important. But a brag document is also really important for promotions. And what's really important when you're going for a promo is that you understand what are the expectations of my current level. Maybe you're engineer 2 or engineer 3 and you're going for senior. It's really important, obviously, that you're at level, that you're having an impact at the level that you're currently at. So if you're engineer 3, you need to be very clear in understanding what is expected by this company as an engineer 3. And hopefully you work at a company where the career ladder or some document exists that tells you at each level what is expected, because you need to really make sure, probably on a monthly basis, is my impact aligned with the expectations of the current level. But you also, if you're going for a promotion, you need to make sure that you're documenting, am I having impact at the next level? Now, you may not be doing everything in this example that a senior engineer is expected to do, but if you're already performing at the next level, that really makes it easy for your manager to have enough impact to recommend that this person's already having impact at the next level. They're a great candidate for this promotion. One other thing that I also recommend, another advice that I would give to myself, as you're going through this promo process, and I'm sure a lot of you have gone through promos before, one of the things that I highly advise is that you find people at the level that you're going to who are willing to vouch that you're ready. And your impact is key, right? There's nothing that can replace your individual contribution as an engineer and the individual impact that you've had. But it's really nice when you can marry your impact to other people who are already at that level saying, this person's ready. So if you're going for a senior engineer, finding senior engineers, you can find staff engineers. That's gold. That's gold. What that means is that you have to start building relationships with these people at the next level. So if they're not on your team, well, okay, let me start. If they're on your team, you want to work with them, right? You want to pair with them. You want to make sure you're finding opportunities to work with them maybe on like a side project. On my team, we have what we call bug bashes once a quarter, where we go through the backlog and we look for either escalations from support or just gnarly bugs that we've been trying to squash for a while or just technical debt. And so if you have that, maybe it's monthly, maybe it's quarterly, but find opportunities to work with those engineers so that you can find a way for them to see what you can do, so that they can mentor you, so that they can see, are you nearing the level that you're trying to go to? If you don't have someone on your team who's at that level, then what I recommend is that if you can, find projects outside of the team. Maybe your company does like fan-out work, where you're working on infrastructure, or you have maybe some period of time some companies have kind of cross-company hack days. If you have that, those are great opportunities for you to say, you know, I'm going for senior, I'm going for staff. Then find people who can vouch for you. And what you want to do is that you want to let them know that you're going for that promo. Maybe not the first time you talk to them, but by letting them know what you're trying to do, then you can partner with them. And ideally, you want them to be able to say in writing that this person is ready for this level. As someone at this level, they're ready for this level. That is really gold for a manager like myself that's trying to determine, are the people who work for me ready for promo? All right, let's talk about the other key thing, one-on-ones. You have to learn to take advantage of one-on-ones. I think when we talk about one-on-ones, we talk about managers, because as a manager, I'm obviously driving the one-on-one. I'm the one who probably schedule it. I'm the one that needs to make sure that we have like a one-on-one document that we're talking through. But as an individual contributor, you should also have a role to play in the one-on-ones. How many people don't have one-on-ones right now, if you're willing to disclose that? Okay, all right, we all have, I don't see any hands. Maybe you're not willing to say that, that's fine. But if you have one-on-ones, it's really to your benefit to make the most of them. That means that you go to them prepared. You have things to talk about that you put on the agenda. As a manager, like, that gets me giddy. Like, oh, okay. You're bringing things to the agenda to talk about during the one-on-one, right? Because I've had people where every one-on-one, they show up, they really don't want to be there, they seem to not want to be there, they never propose anything to talk about. That person is not really invested in the one-on-one. But if you invest in the one-on-one, you get out of it what you put into it. Again, this is something that I really wish I knew in that first 2 to 3 years of my career, because your manager's busy. Your manager is taking time out of their busy schedule to give you their total focus, right? And time is the only truly non-renewable resource. So they're giving you this thing that they can't ever get back for your benefit. Why would you not take advantage of that? So that's a key thing that you can do early in your career to help to upgrade it and to help you reach your goals earlier. All right, I'm going to say this. This might be the most controversial thing I'm going to say during this entire talk, but I'm going to say it anyway. If your manager was asked by their manager to get rid of half the team, your manager knows who they would get rid of, probably within like a minute or two of thinking. I've been asked this question. And I've been asked this question both directly and indirectly, because most companies have a process. This is not something we say out loud, that you basically stack rank the people who are on your team. And you determine who are those 1 or 2 pillars of your team that you can't live without, and then who are the rest. And unless you're in a team of 1 or 2, it's usually really easy for a manager who's worked with the team for 3 or 4 months, maybe less, to come up with this list. So I want all of you to go home today and message your manager and say, will I make the cut? I'm kidding. Don't do that. Don't do that. That's the career-limiting move. Don't do that. But your manager probably knows. Again, with very little deliberation, with very little thinking, because we work with the team every day. We know the people who are having that impact that I was talking about. We know the people who, if they left, stuff would stop, right? We talk about, we tend to say bus factor, right? If this person was hit by a bus, would we really feel it? I tend to say, like, I like to call it like the lottery factor. It's a person who won the lottery. That's a less macabre way of saying it. If this person won the lottery tomorrow, would we feel it? And there are people on the team where, yes, we would be, everything that we're planning for the next quarter or the next 2 quarters, not going to do it. But there are people who, no, really wouldn't miss them. And it's probably the people who aren't focusing on impact, right? They're not using a brag document to talk through what they're doing for the company or for the customers. There's probably people who aren't leveraging one-on-ones, right? Those are the people that managers often use flying under the radar. So that's something we don't say out loud, but every manager that I've talked to can easily make that call. You don't want to be on the wrong half of that decision. All right. So we made it to the first 3 years, right? So you've survived the first year. You're beginning to work on things that are more complicated. At this time, it's really important that you're doing work that's more complicated, that's less defined, because if you're like that first year or so, you're getting things probably handed to you. You're getting specs that you can pull out. You're getting things that are really heavily defined, right? You just have to implement this thing. As you go throughout your career, you're getting past those first couple of years. As an engineer, you're getting, you know what? We have this problem. You figure out what we need to do. And so that's what you should be doing. But one of the things that I know I really did not measure very well is how much am I valued by my manager or by the team? How much am I valued by the company? Am I respected by my peers? Am I respected by my manager? And there are lots of ways that you can measure this, but one of the things that I found to be useful as a way to measure how much are you valued is, do people bring private things to you? Do people share things that are not public yet with you? Because I know, like around year 3 or 4 of my career, I was always surprised by things happening. What? This person's leaving the team? oh, we're having layoffs? There's a reorg? This person's having a baby? Like, I was always surprised because I didn't do this. Because I thought that, well, that's just politics. I'm focused on the work. I'm focused on making sure that the work is done and that it's right. But politics are part of the game, right? Politics just means people ticks. It means that it's people stuff. And as an engineer, you have to understand politics. And by being involved in the people part of the job, especially with your peers and your manager, then what you'll find is that you're getting a little bit of a heads up, right? So one way to measure this is if you're always surprised by things happening to the team that affect you, you probably haven't built the relationships properly. You probably haven't gained the respect of your manager. And I found that as I went through my career, I learned ways to do this. I learned ways to get that respect. I learned ways to get that trust. People have come to me and said, I'm pregnant, and no one knows at the company but you. But I'm coming to tell you that because I just want you to know, because I trust you. Or I'm leaving the company, and I don't have a job lined up yet, but I'm really unhappy here. And I don't want anyone else to know, but I'm telling you because I trust you, because Anjuan, I trust you. So it's really about trust, right? And so this is not about writing code, right? There's no code to write to earn trust. Maybe at some point, I don't know, maybe AI is going to do this for us. But you really have to build trust through just human interaction. And let me give you a shortcut. In my career, again, 25, 26 years, I've learned that to get trust, you have to give trust. You have to learn to be vulnerable. You have to, when appropriate, let people know, I'm having a hard time in my personal life right now. Man, I'm not really showing up the way I want to show up at work. I'm going to take a day, right? Because that's just called being human. And by being vulnerable, people respond to that. Because what you're really saying is that it's okay to be human at work. Because guess what? We're all humans at work. So just by being vulnerable, by doing that, you're actually giving trust, and then you're going to receive trust. And then you'll start to get those conversations in Slack. Hey, can I hop on a Zoom with you? There's something I want to get off my chest. Or, hey, something's coming down the pipe. You should have a heads up. And if you're doing that, then that's the signal that, okay, I'm building the relationships. I'm building the things that I need to have where people give me a heads up. So, again, we're going to talk more about this. It's a complicated topic, but it's really important at this stage in your career. Also, avoid glue work. The person who really coined this term is Tanya Riley. Tanya blogs at noidea.dog. It's a very easy URL. Tanya's brilliant. I've gone to her workshops. I've read her books. And Tanya popularized the idea of glue work. Who's heard of glue work before? A couple people. All right. So on any engineering team, there are things that need to be done that aren't writing code. Maybe it's grooming the backlog, or maybe it's writing the documentation, or maybe it's unblocking engineers. So like that, this work is necessary, and it's hard, but it's not the work that usually gets rewarded because we're paid to write code. Those administrative tasks need to be done, but if you wrap yourself in that stuff, you're going to be hiding your impact. So I'm not saying to avoid doing this, but be very careful. If your job is an engineer, but you spend a big chunk of your time doing non-code tasks, you're probably doing glue work. You're probably doing work that keeps the team tight, keeps the team glued together, but does not contribute to the OKRs of the team, doesn't contribute to the goals of the team. And that's the work that often does not get rewarded when it comes time to promote people, when it comes time to give people raises. And honestly, women often get stuck with doing glue work, right? This is a problem in our industry. So I will say that if you're in this stage, have a conversation with your manager and say, you know what, I've heard this term glue work, and I'm doing a lot of it. Let me define it for you. I really want to make sure that this is not having a negative impact on my career. And so your manager may say, okay, great, happy to talk about this. And you can say, we have a rating system where we have meets, exceeds, or does not meet. Where am I, in your opinion, right now? If you had to rate me, and review season or rating season might be like many months in the future, have the conversation. It's a hard conversation. It's a gutsy conversation. It's a conversation you need to have if you're doing a lot of glue work. Because often people doing glue work, the manager got to say, well, I really appreciate what you're doing. You run the retrospective, you run the retros, you keep the documents up to date, you order tacos on Tuesdays, whatever it is that you do. But I mean, there's actually stuff that at level we expect that you're not doing. And so it's a hard conversation, but when you ask your manager how they would rate you, you're asking them to go to the career ladder of the company and give you feedback on how you're doing. Because managers, again, we're busy. We're doing a lot of complicated stuff. We're managing up and we're managing across and we're doing all these things. And it's very easy, to be honest, to just really selfishly take all this glue work because it's making our jobs easier. And then when it comes time to reward, you get overlooked. You get penalized. So by forcing the conversation, you're forcing them to go back to what really matters. So if the conversation is, oh, I would give you exceeds, right? Well, then, okay, maybe the manager does value glue work more than most people do. You probably want to get that in writing, by the way. But you really want to force the conversation because a lot of people, and again, women in our industry are unfairly penalized. So I highly encourage you to be, if you're doing a lot of glue work, have the conversation. If you want to know Tanya Riley's details, I can share that later. But again, it's noidea.dog. All right, so you've been an individual contributor for a number of years. You become a manager. You're handed a team to manage. So you're not just having impact yourself. You're responsible for the impact of other engineers. It's exciting. It's terrifying. I've done it for a long time. I've done like people who raise their hands, like, why do I keep doing this to myself? I need to go back to writing code for a living. But you're a manager. And there are so many things I have to say about what I've learned about being a manager. Most of my quarter century in code at this point has been as a manager. So one thing that they don't tell you when you're handed this team is that every team is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And like I've had managers write documentation about everyone on the team, their strengths and their weaknesses, what they've been doing since they joined the team. And like I appreciate that documentation. But you know what they don't include? They don't include the people who are disgruntled. They don't include the people who are burned out. They don't include the people who say that they like getting feedback, but actually cry when you give them feedback. Like, none of that's included in this documentation. And so as a manager, it's very important that you understand that it's going to be a new experience. And a number of people say, well, you know what? I was in the team before I started managing the team. I was an engineer working on the team, and I got promoted. So I kind of know the people I'm working with. No, you don't. You don't. You know how they say that you never know someone until you live with them? You never know someone until you manage them. And I've seen all kinds of like relationship dynamics change when someone goes from being part of the team to managing the team. So like you don't get a free pass if that's you. If that's you. So it's really important that you dig into this brand new box of chocolate that you've been given. And so just like I talked about how there are ways that you can know, are you respected, right? Do people treat you, do people give you private information? Do people give you things that they don't tell other people, right? That's one sign as an IC that you've built the right relationships that you need to have as an engineer. You not only have the code stuff, you have the people stuff. As a manager, one way to know, and I said this earlier, that people respect you, the people who report to you, is how do they treat one-on-ones? If individual contributors, the people who report to you, if your directs treat one-on-ones as the special time that it is, if they come to it prepared, if they treat it as a time where you are mentoring them, that person respects you. If they don't, if they try to say, hey, we meet weekly, can we meet fortnightly? Can we meet less? That's not a great sign. Because guess what? If I told you that I will give you $100 every time we have a one-on-one weekly, would you say, can we meet every 2 weeks? You wouldn't do that because you see that you're getting value from the one-on-one. So like one of the biggest signs of respect that your ICs can give you is how do they approach one-on-ones? How do they approach that special time? Do they take it seriously? All right, that's one big thing. I'm going to tell you the opposite. The biggest sign of disrespect that your directs can give you as a manager is when they go around you. And I've had this done to me. I've had people, this is years ago now, but it was during the time where we were doing the review season, and everyone writes their kind of self-review, and then the engineers do peer reviews of each other. And one of the people on my team felt that I would not give the feedback to the other person, so they went to another manager and said, can I give this to you because I don't trust Anjuan to give this feedback to the other person. Now, I don't know what I did to this person to make them think that. I actually had already given the feedback, but thankfully, the manager that they went to said, you should talk to Anjuan because he's your manager. And like, that's when you know, because I mean, there are times when you do have to go around a manager, right? There are bad managers out there. I think we've all had them. But often, this person, and what I found out later is that this person was just someone who had a lot of just unfounded fears about their job. They, on multiple occasions, thought that they were going to be fired when like that wasn't the case. And so this was not in the box of chocolates that I was handed, right? This was new information to me. And so when people go around you as your manager, that is one of the biggest signs of disrespect. And so I had to actively and compassionately manage this person because I realized that I didn't have their trust. I didn't have their trust, and it's really important as a manager that you establish a trusting relationship with the people who work for you. If you have no trust, you have nothing. People may do some work for you if they don't trust you, but they're not going to give you their all, right? And I'm sure we've all had managers that were good managers, right? The best manager that we've ever had. The manager that if you said, we're going to march into whatever enemy territory you want to come up with, like I would follow that person. That person has built trust. With trust, you can do anything. Without trust, you can't do much. All right, I want to talk about your peers because as a manager, what you'll learn is that, okay, I have directs who report to me, but now I have peers. And these peers could be product designers, they could be product managers, developer relations, and I love the DevRel team at GitHub. I've formed great relationships with them. It could be other parts. It could be the support team. And what you'll find, and this has not been an issue for me for a long time, but your peers don't care about your directs. They just want their stuff to get done. Your product managers don't care about the people who report to you, especially if they don't have direct reports of their own. I've had multiple product managers when one of the people on my team wasn't delivering whatever they wanted, and they've told me, I really don't care what's going on with them. I just want this stuff done. And there were a couple times where the person who was my direct was going through like a hard time. They were having a lot of mental anguish. They were having some physical health problems. And I shared that with this product manager, and the product manager said, I don't really care. I just don't want their problems to become my problems. I mean, I've heard this from other people, of my peers. And so what you have to understand is that you have to give results, and your peers aren't going to take excuses. Every now and then, you'll find people who are compassionate, who care, but a lot of the time, what you'll find is that they're like, you're the manager. That's your job. I don't care if this person was hit by a car. I don't care if they're struggling in other ways. I need this stuff done. Again, we don't often say this out loud, but I'm just letting you know that's often the case. So as a manager, you have to own it. You have to own it. You have to make sure that you're doing what you can to deliver the work and also tend to the direct. And it's hard. That's why we get paid to be managers, because it's really unfair. People should be understanding. I wish there was more compassion. Again, I've had compassionate peers. Most of my career, I've had them, but most companies, I have that one or two people, they just don't care. And that's just, unfortunately, a part of being a manager. You have to own the responsibility, and you have to clean up the mess. Documentation. Documentation. Documentation is the currency of being a manager. Write everything down. I have a document that I keep. It's like a brag doc, but it's for my directs, where I have the names of everyone who reports to me, and at least once a week, I update every single person's entry in this document of my directs with their accomplishments, with areas to improve, with things I've heard from other people, because I also need to have a contemporaneous account of my directs, because I have a limited memory. I'm busy. And by doing that, I also am empowered when it comes time to write reviews, to figure out who's going to be promoted, to have contemporaneous notes to help me make that decision. So it's critical that you do this. So if someone, hey, when you were on call, you rocked it. I mean, you took care of all these things that were going on. We have production issues. We have support escalations. That's great. Or you may have someone like April described where you don't write tests. Everyone doesn't like you because of it. You need to write tests. And every week that they don't write tests, you got to write it down. Because what you're doing, and I mean, it's not, some people may say this as like building a case against someone, and that's not really what it's doing. As your manager, your job, in many ways, is to be the chronicler, the chronicle of your team, to let people know what happened. And only by doing this with diligence and with care and with detail can you create that true record of what happened. And by doing that, you're also removing your biases, because you're getting past how you feel. Because I mean, as a manager, I've had people who were pillars of my team who I don't like anymore because they did something that I didn't care for, but I got to get past that, because it's not about what I like or what I don't like. It's about what value, what impact are we bringing to the company and what we're bringing to our customers. So it's very important that you keep that document. And again, you want to focus on impact. That's very important. All right, I want to close with this, and then we'll have time for Q&A. If you are a member of an underrepresented group, right? So I'm a black person, if you did not notice. I'm a black man up here. I know, surprise. There are not a lot of black managers in software development, right? You probably have experienced that. There are not a lot of black managers here. We've done a really good job of getting more women into the technology industry, and I love it, and that's amazing. People of color, not so much. So to expand it a little bit more, we do have a number of people of color here, which is great. But I know that for a lot of people, I'm the first person of color that's managed them. And humans tend to think of new as weird. Right? If cheese started raining from the sky, maybe that happens in Copenhagen, I don't think so. We would think that's new. But then what would we say after that? That's weird. Right? Awesome. Or someone was, hey, everyone get a lighter, it's queso time. And just to be very, again, things that we don't say out loud is when you are given a team as a person of color, and it may not be conscious, it's often subconscious, people may wonder, because I've never seen this before. I've never had a black man manage me, or a Latina manage me, or someone who's from a country, right, that has managed me, right? This ethnic origin is new to me. And they're going to have concerns because some people may feel like, well, are you a token, right? Were you hired to fill some diversity quota, right? This stuff happens. This stuff happens, right? We're all humans. And they may doubt you. They may not feel that you're really qualified to manage them. And I haven't had this explicitly told to me, but I've had some private conversations where people have said that like there were concerns, right? Because it's just a first experience. And just as someone who's had to deal with it, because I've been black all my life, and in technology for 25 years, 26 years, there are a couple of things that I've learned to do. One, you have to have almost flawless execution. I put a lot into my job, right? Because honestly, I know I don't get the benefit of the doubt that maybe other people do. So I really am relentless in doing my job at the highest possible level, because I want them to know that I'm for real. I've done this for a long time. I've led many successful teams. I'm not perfect, but I'm really good at my job, right? So there is the burden of having to overperform. And again, I know that's not fair. I know we don't say this out loud, but I feel that burden. And the issue with racism is that racism is not everywhere, but it can be anywhere. And it's the same thing with sexism and homophobia, because you never know where it is, but you know it could be out there. And that's the burden that comes with having those identities. So again, this may be like my unhealthy coping mechanism, but I really try to overperform. I really try to be the best possible manager that I can be, right, to really serve my team well. One thing that organizations can do, and I've done this at a couple companies, is when you hire someone, especially if they're a manager, then do what's called a hiring summary. And what that is that when you post a job, and then people start applying, you just publish the numbers, right? Here's all the people that made it to the first stage. Here's how many women made it. Here's how many people of color made it. Here's how many people came to the second stage. You basically publicize the funnel. And then, as they get to the end, you say, here's why we hired Anjuan for this job. And you go through, during the interview, this person explained exactly what we were looking for. They had history in this area. They have experience solving the problems that we're having. And you make that public. And these hiring summaries are just posted to the company blog. And by doing that, one, you're telling people the story of your hiring process. But two, you're helping to hopefully debunk the idea that this person just walked in because of the color of their skin, or their gender, or their orientation. And so these are powerful ways in a lot of ways, but by partnering with recruiting, I've been able to do this to help remove that stigma. All right, I typically have frequently asked questions that I go through because I've been doing this for a long time, but let's open the floor for questions. We have a microphone. I know we have about a little less than 5 minutes, so we can do a few. So who has questions? Raise your hand. All right, we have one up here. I know you want to maybe say your name and where you're from?
Hi, my name.
Oh, I don't know if it's hot.
Testing.
There we go.
Hi, my name's George. I work for Microsoft. I'm from Perth, Western Australia.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, the last topic that you spoke about, do you think that there's room to use technology to try and completely sanitize everyone until a certain point of an interview, so that you know that you've got like technically personality, like all of the qualifications, but in such a way that like the ethnicity or the gender or sexual orientation doesn't matter? Or do you think that would actually harm the process?
You know, so blind reviews, right, where we take any PII, anything that would identify the race of this person. I think there's been experiments with that. I think it's early days. We don't know the impact. We do know, at least in America, that ethically sounding names have an impact, right? There's a big study that showed that when you had resumes with like Susan or Tom, then you had Ebony or Tyrone, that the ethnically sounding names, I mean, this has been proven statistically that those aren't called in for interviews at the same rate of others. So we know that names matter. We know that gender matters. So I do think some blind hiring would be great, but I'm not sure if people have done it enough to know the good and the bad, right? Anything you do is going to have good outcomes, but also unintended consequences. We need more companies to try that. But I love that idea. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, if someone behind you want to hand the mic. All right, name and where you're from.
Yeah, my name is Alan, and I'm here from Denmark. I work in a software company that deals with the primary healthcare sector software. It's more like a comment, I think. I've been also through that, and I've been working with the computer since 1982, and been in the same company for now 25 years. And also went through a management for 7 years, and what I found is that I came longer and longer, I moved longer and longer away from what I actually loved, and that was coding. So it took so many years before I actually found out that it was 70% management and learning about people and management, and 30% of what I actually loved. So I ended up going back to the coding part. Yeah. And I've been really happy about it since then. But it took a long time because it's for natural development that I had to evolve during the time, and I was okay with the job, but So it's just a comment that you have to be aware if you get and work at that management. It's actually the part that where you were when you started out working with this.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Charity Majors has done amazing writing on this about people going from being managers, from engineers to managers and kind of trying on the role. I think it's fantastic. If your company can support that, I really would love that. We have time for one more question. Are you good? Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm Daniel. I live
Hey,
here in Denmark, but I'm originally from Brazil.
Okay.
Do you have any tips when the one-on-one starts to become like status meetings, especially when it's a new manager?
Okay. So I'm going to say a name, Lara Hogan. Who knows Lara Hogan? Yeah, Lara Hogan, L-A-R-A, Lara Hogan, H-O-G-O-N, like Hulk Hogan. I don't know, that's how I remember it. Has done amazing writing, better than I could ever give you, about one-on-ones, how to keep them fun, how to keep them fresh. And so I highly recommend Laura's. I never say, is it Lara or Laura? I know, Lara. Depends how you like to say. Okay, I like Lara. Lara Hogan is how I recommend. All right, that's my time. I'll be around a little bit after. Again, I want you all to know that your career is not something that simply happens to you. You can align it with what you want it to be. And I hope that my tips will help you do that. I'm at Anjuan almost everywhere that you can look on social media. Please connect with me. I would love to celebrate your success. Thank you.